The X-Men are finally coming to the MCU. But here's a doozy. What if the mutants have always been there, and they were just hidden by Professor X?
As if gamma accidents, radioactive bug bites, and assorted mutants weren't enough.
The big question is, how will the X-Men actually show up in the MCU? There are many possibilities, but here is something original that could be mind-blowing. What if the X-Men and all of the other mutants have always been in the world of the MCU? And the reason why no one noticed them is because Professor X used his telepathic abilities to make everyone forget about the mutants. Confused? Well, allow me to explain. While all of us fans wait impatiently for the X-Men to finally join the MCU, we can all agree that Marvel Studios will need to find a good way to explain the sudden appearance of the mutants in the world. Sure, Scarlet Witch can always go all House of M, changing reality and creating the mutants, or maybe have the X-Men come from another universe. While it's very possible, I'm going to try and be a bit more original here. Imagine this. What if the mutants have been part of the MCU world from the very start, but the reason no one knew about them is because Charles Xavier has been using his telepathic powers to erase any memories of the mutants from people's minds? And yes, that is something Professor X can totally do. Allow me to explain. Charles Xavier is one of the most powerful telepaths in the world, and he has some seriously terrifying abilities. He was able to put Thor to sleep, fight off the Dark Phoenix, and defeat Omega-level mutants, just with his brain. One of his powers is the ability to manipulate people's minds and change their memories, like when he telepathically blocked young Jean Grey's memories and powers, which ended up being a big no-no when Jean became the Dark Phoenix. But Jean wasn't the only one. Xavier had changed and erased memories for lots of people over the years. And it's not just changing or erasing memories, he can influence what you see right in front of your eyes. Now let me explain how this memory erasing thing could actually work in the MCU. Let's, for example, say there's a mutant kid that can shoot fire from his hands, who goes ballistic in a small town. The X-Men will show up and stop that mutant. Then Xavier will either roll up on the scene or just use Cerebro from the X-Mansion and make all the witnesses forget about the whole incident and the mutant who can shoot fire from his hands. Changing their memories, putting fake new memories instead, making them believe that there was some freak accident or a gas explosion, he's pretty much doing the whole Men in Black thing.
So you just flash that thing, it erases her memory, and you just make up a new one?
A standard issue neuralizer.
And so for years, anytime mutants will use their powers in public, Xavier will just erase any memory of the incidents. This way, the mutants will stay safe and hidden from less welcoming people. And it's not just the public incidents. I'm talking about Xavier removing any evidence that mutants have ever existed in the MCU. This could explain why no one's ever mentioned the mutants. And once the X-Men finally come into the light, Marvel Studios won't have to start retconning the X-Men's origins and history, just to explain their sudden appearance. Charles Xavier always tried to deal with the whole humans versus mutants thing in a peaceful way. However, in almost every X-Men story, mutants always face serious prejudice and hate from humans. Maybe in the MCU, the young Charles tried to achieve a peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans. However, maybe there was some type of dramatic event that led to Xavier realizing that his peaceful dreams are just that, dreams. And he needed to take drastic measures to protect his own people. And the only way to do that was to hide the mutants from the rest of the world.
It's all just a means to an end, Raven.
What end is that?
Keeping us safe.
Now you might say that that's an extreme solution and that it's out of character for the good professor, but that's not entirely true. Xavier has resorted to extreme measures many times in the comics. In fact, Charles is a pretty complex and flawed character who's done some really messed up things over the years. He even created the Xavier Protocols, which is a contingency plan to stop and kill the X-Men and other mutants. Having a more complex Professor X in the MCU will actually be a good thing. Just look at Iron Man. Sure, he was one of the main heroes, but he has also made tons of mistakes over the years. That complexity made Tony Stark into a fascinating character. Also, it will be interesting to explore how the X-Men themselves feel about the whole memory erasing thing. Sure, some loyal X-Men like Cyclops might be totally fine with that since it keeps the mutants safe. But others might be against this extreme solution, and let's not forget about Magneto, who's likely not going to play by Xavier's rules. all of this can create some very complex stories for the X-Men. Recently, Marvel relaunched the X-Men in the comics, with the House of X storyline where Xavier abandoned his dream for peace between humans and mutants, and he turned the island Krakoa into a sovereign nation for mutants. So maybe Marvel Studios could take some notes from the House of X storyline when bringing the X-Men into the MCU. Of course, sooner or later, the world will find out about the mutants, since how else will we see the X-Men interacting with the other MCU heroes? But if Professor X is hiding the mutants from the world, how will the mutants be revealed? Well, good thing a certain Mad Titan showed up and wiped out 50% of all life in the universe.
What?
Okay, that's actually not a good thing, it's a really bad thing. I mean, just imagine the dust crisis that followed the decimation. All those poor people getting wiped out of existence, leaving piles of dust behind them. Seriously, what did people do with all that dust? Is it insensitive to use a vacuum cleaner to collect your roommate's dust from the floor? I mean, sure, it's pretty sad that he turned into dust, but you can't just leave a pile of dust in the middle of the living room, now can ya? Anyway, Thanos did the whole snap thing and you know the rest. Now here is the fun part. What if Charles Xavier was one of the casualties of the decimation? With Xavier gone, suddenly there's no one to hide the mutants from the rest of the world. Suddenly, if mutants use their powers in public, the X-Men can't just make the witnesses forget about it. After that, it's only a matter of time until people find out about the existence of the mutants, which could lead to the usual prejudice and suspicion against them. All of this is the very thing Xavier tried to prevent, but with him being gone, no one can stop the eventual clash between humanity and the mutants. Now, of course, the decimation was undone, and Xavier returned to life with the other 50%, so you could say he'll just undo the reveal of the mutants and make everybody forget about them with his powers once again. But here's the catch. What if the events of both Infinity War and Endgame lead to Charles Xavier having a change of heart? After being turned to dust, it's possible that Xavier will come to terms with his own mortality. After all, he's no Wolverine, he can't live forever. He was erased from existence, leaving all his people unprotected and unprepared to face the world. Not to mention that the X-Men could have been a huge help in the battle against Thanos. These reasons could lead to Xavier making the decision to stop using his powers to hide mutants from the world, and instead have the mutants step out of the shadows and become heroes. But let's be honest, one of the main reasons why fans want to see the X-Men join the MCU is the big crossover events that we could get. The main one is Avengers vs. X-Men. Superheroes tend to be a pretty sensitive bunch. They'll start punching and kicking each other over the smallest misunderstanding. So you could imagine how some heroes might react to the sudden reveal of the mutants, and the fact that Professor X has been messing with their memories for decades. All of this could create a lot of tension between the new Avengers and the X-Men, which is, of course, a great recipe for a future Avengers vs. X-Men movie event, Disney, if you're listening. Now, this is kind of really off topic, but am I the only one that thinks that the X-Men should get their own Disney Plus show? After watching The Mandalorian, I'm very certain that the perfect next step for the X-Men is a TV show. The Mandalorian is proof that you can do an epic Star Wars story on television, and based on the footage we saw from the MCU Disney Plus shows, I'm confident Marvel Studios could do a big-budget X-Men series. The X-Men have so many great characters and stories, and the best way to bring all of that to life is across multiple hours and seasons. With the MCU's busy movie schedule, it's going to be hard to really give the X-Men their time to shine. However, with a Disney Plus show, Marvel could spend a lot more time with the characters and their complex stories. After 2 failed attempts in adapting the Dark Phoenix saga, I think we can all agree that the epic story can only be done right over the course of a 10-hour season and not a 2-hour movie. And of course, the X-Men will still show up in the movies. They could team up with the Avengers and other heroes in big crossover events, since that is kind of the point of having the X-Men in the MCU. However, their standalone stories will be explored on the streaming service, and if you're unsure about this idea, just look at shows like The Umbrella Academy or Doom Patrol. Both are great examples for how an X-Men show could be done right. Anyway, going back to the theory, this will probably sound very biased, but I think that going with the idea that Professor X has been hiding the mutants with his powers might be the best direction for the X-Men and the MCU, and it could lead to some really amazing stories and conflicts. Hopefully, we'll see the X-Men join the MCU sooner rather than later. What do you think about this theory? Do you think Professor X is hiding the X-Men? Would you want to see an X-Men Disney Plus show? Let us know in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this video, show us some love by leaving a like and subscribing to CBR. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.